The first gunshot had missed her head by barely an inch, and Violet Lowell was convinced her father had finally lost his mind. Standing in the front yard of their ranch house, watching her father's second shot pierce the cloudless Arizona sky, she realized this arrangement, this unthinkable bargain, was no idle threat. The year was 1879, and Edward Lowell had just announced that his 20-year-old daughter would marry Jasper Blackburn, the wealthiest landowner in the territory, a man 3 decades her senior with a reputation as ruthless as the desert itself. "You'll be Mrs. Blackburn by month's end, or you'll be buried on this worthless patch of dirt," her father snarled, lowering his smoking pistol. His once handsome face was ravaged by years of whiskey and bitterness, eyes hollow from the drought that had nearly destroyed their cattle ranch outside Gila City, Arizona. "His land has water rights, water we need. Either you marry him, or we lose everything." "I won't do it," Violet said, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on her shoulders, much like her father's ultimatum pressed against her heart. "I won't marry a man I don't love." Edward Lowell spat into the dust. "Love? What good has love ever done anyone? Your mother loved me, and look what it got her dead before 35, buried out back." He gestured toward the small family plot where 3 simple wooden crosses stood sentinel against the harsh landscape. "Blackburn's offering 500 acres with water access. That's worth more than any foolish notion of love." Violet's golden brown hair lifted slightly in the hot breeze as she stared at the man who had once carried her on his shoulders, taught her to ride, and read to her by lamplight. That father had disappeared gradually after her mother's death, replaced by this stranger who saw her only as a commodity to be traded. "When is this meeting to take place?" she asked, knowing argument was futile. Her father had the same look he got before shooting a wounded horse, a decision made, mercy abandoned. "Sunday, after church. You'll wear your blue dress, the one your mother made." He turned away, holstering his pistol. "Don't embarrass me, girl." As her father disappeared into the barn, Violet felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. 4 days. 4 days before she would be inspected like livestock by a man whose reputation made even hardened ranch hands lower their voices when speaking his name. The following morning, as dawn broke over the parched landscape, Violet saddled her Palomino mare, Marigold. She needed to escape, if only for a few hours, to clear her head and consider her options, though she knew they were limited. A woman alone in the Arizona territory had few choices beyond marriage or servitude, and her father had made it clear which path she would take. She rode hard toward Quicksilver Creek, a slender ribbon of water that had somehow survived the drought, winding through a stand of cottonwoods 5 miles from the ranch. It was her sanctuary, the one place she could think without her father's presence looming over her. The creek was barely more than a trickle now, but it still provided enough moisture for wildflowers to bloom along its banks. Violet dismounted, allowing Marigold to drink while she settled against a sun-warmed rock. Her thoughts chased each other like tumbleweeds in a storm. Could she run away? Where would she go? The nearest town with a stagecoach was 30 miles away, and even if she reached it, what then? The sound of another horse approaching snapped her from her reverie. Instinctively, she reached for the small derringer she kept in her boot, another lesson from her father before bitterness had consumed him. A woman alone needed protection. "Easy there," a deep voice called out. "Just passing through." The stranger rode into view astride a powerful black stallion. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the precise color of the turquoise, stones the Navajo traders sometimes brought to town. His dark hair curled slightly beneath a well-worn hat, and a week's worth of stubble shadowed his jawline. "This is private land," Violet said. though she wasn't entirely certain whose property the creek crossed at this point. The man dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent his life on horseback. "Apologies, madam. The creek's running dry further south. My horse needed water." He tipped his hat. "Owen Lawson, I'm moving a herd for the Carlisle outfit. You're a long way from any Carlisle grazing land," she observed, still clutching the derringer, though no longer pointing it in his direction. "That I am." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Got separated from my men during that dust storm yesterday. Been trying to find my bearings since dawn." Despite her wariness, Violet found herself returning his smile. There was something disarming about Owen Lawson's straightforward manner. "You're headed in the wrong direction, Mr. Lawson. Carlisle land is northwest of here." "Is that so?" He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "And you are Violet Lowell. My father's ranch is east of here." Edward Lowell's daughter. Recognition flickered across his face. "I've heard of your father." The way he said it told Violet exactly what he'd heard, none of it flattering. Her father's reputation for hard drinking and harder dealings had spread throughout the territory. "Yes, well, reputations often exceed the reality," she lied, feeling a strange need to defend her family name despite everything. "True enough." Owen nodded toward Marigold. "Beautiful horse. Palominos have always been my favorite." "Mine too," Violet said, her guard dropping slightly. "I've had Marigold since she was a foal." Owen let his own horse drink before leading it away from the creek bank. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I should get back on track. Which way would you suggest to rejoin the Carlisle herd?" Violet pointed northwest. "Follow the creek until you reach a fork. Take the right branch and you'll see a mesa in the distance. The Carlisle grazing land lies at its base." "Much obliged, Miss Lowell." He mounted his stallion with the same fluid grace. "Perhaps our paths will cross again." "Perhaps," she replied, though she doubted it. In 4 days she would be Mrs. Jasper Blackburn, bound to a man who measured life in acres and cattle. As Owen Lawson rode away, Violet felt a curious pang of regret. The brief encounter had been the most pleasant conversation she'd had in months. Living isolated on the failing ranch with only her embittered father for company had been a lonely existence since their last ranch hand had quit 6 months earlier. When she returned home, her father was waiting, his face thunderous. "Where have you been? There's work to be done. The fence in the south pasture won't repair itself." "I needed to think," she said, unsaddling Marigold. "Think, what's there to think about? The arrangement is made." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Blackburn's bringing his lawyer on Sunday. Everything's being drawn up proper. You'll sign the marriage papers and I'll sign over a portion of our land for his water rights. A fair exchange." "A fair exchange?" Violet wrenched free. "Trading me like a horse at auction." The slap came fast, stinging her cheek and bringing tears to her eyes, not from pain, but from the final confirmation that the father she had once loved was truly gone. "You ungrateful girl." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "After everything I've done to keep this ranch going." "Your mother would be ashamed." "Don't you dare speak of her," Violet hissed, stepping back. "She would never have allowed this." Her father's laugh was hollow. "Your mother was a practical woman. She'd understand survival." He turned away. "Get cleaned up. Pastor Mills is coming for dinner to discuss the ceremony." Violet spent the remainder of the day in a fog of despair, mechanically preparing a meal she had no appetite to eat, listening to her father and the pastor discuss her future as if she weren't present. Pastor Mills, a thin, nervous man who had always seemed afraid of Edward Lowell, nodded enthusiastically at everything her father said. "A fine match," the pastor declared, helping himself to more stew. "Blackburn's a powerful man, respected." "Feared is more accurate," Violet murmured. Her father shot her a warning glance. Violet will make Blackburn a good wife. She's been taught proper household management and has a gentle way with children. The pastor nodded again. Blackburn's first two wives were unable to provide him heirs. Perhaps Miss Violet will succeed where they failed. First two wives. The words echoed in Violet's mind. She knew of Blackburn's first wife who had died in childbirth, but not of a second. What happened to his second wife? She asked, interrupting the men's conversation. An uncomfortable silence fell. Pastor Mills suddenly became very interested in his plate. An unfortunate accident, her father finally said. Fell from a horse. These things happen. But something in his averted gaze told Violet there was more to the story, and cold dread settled in her stomach. That night, as she lay sleepless in her narrow bed, Violet made a decision. She would not meekly accept this fate. She had 3 days to find an alternative, any alternative to becoming Jasper Blackburn's third wife. The next morning, she rode into Gila City under the pretense of purchasing supplies for Sunday's meeting. The small frontier town consisted of little more than a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of other businesses stretched along a dusty main street. It wasn't much, but it represented her only hope of escape. Her first stop was the telegraph office. With shaking hands, she wrote a message to her mother's sister in San Francisco, a woman she hadn't seen since childhood but who had faithfully sent Christmas cards each year. The message was brief, a plea for refuge and the promise to explain upon arrival. "That'll be 50 cents, the telegraph operator said, eyeing her curiously. "Messages to California take a day or two to receive replies." "I understand," Violet said, handing over the coins, nearly half of the money she had secretly saved over the past year. Her next stop was the Wells Fargo office, where she inquired about the stagecoach schedule. "Next eastbound stage leaves tomorrow at noon," the clerk informed her. $7 to Tucson, 15 all the way to El Paso. Violet's heart sank. $7 was more than she had. Even if she sold her mother's cameo brooch, the only item of value she possessed, she wouldn't have enough for the ticket and expenses. As she stood on the boardwalk contemplating her dwindling options, a commotion further down the street caught her attention. A group of cowboys had ridden into town, dust-covered and trail-weary. With a jolt of recognition, she spotted Owen Lawson among them, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. The men dismounted outside the saloon, and as if sensing her gaze, Owen looked up. Recognition flashed across his face, and he raised a hand in greeting before saying something to his companions and walking toward her. "Miss Lowell," he said, tipping his hat. "Seems our paths crossed again sooner than expected. Mr. Lawson." She nodded, suddenly conscious of her simple calico dress and wind-blown hair. "What brings you to town?" he asked, falling into step beside her as she began walking toward the general store. "Supplies," she said, the lie coming easily. "And yourself?" delivered the Carlyle heard yesterday. "Just collecting our pay before heading back out." He studied her face, his expression turning concerned. "Is everything all right, Miss Lowell? You seem troubled." Perhaps it was his genuine tone or the desperate circumstances, but Violet found herself wanting to confide in this virtual stranger. "Not particularly, no." They had reached the general store, and Owen held the door for her. "Would you allow me to buy you a cup of coffee? Sometimes talking to someone removed from a situation can help." Violet hesitated. Accepting such an invitation would be considered scandalous by town standards. But given that in 3 days she would be forced to marry a man she despised, propriety seemed a minor concern. "Yes," she decided. "I would appreciate that." They settled at a small table in the back of Mrs. Henderson's bakery, a respectable enough establishment that Violet's reputation wouldn't be entirely ruined by being seen there with a cowboy. Over steaming coffee and fresh baked biscuits, Violet found herself telling Owen Lawson everything: her father's financial troubles, the arranged marriage, her desperate attempt to escape. It poured out of her like water through a broken dam, unstoppable once begun. Owen listened without interruption, his expression darkening when she mentioned Jasper Blackburn's name. "Blackburn has a reputation that extends beyond the territory," he said grimly when she finished. "His second wife's death was no accident, according to those who worked his ranch. Nothing was proven, but—" "I suspected as much," Violet said quietly. "What am I to do, Mr. Lawson? I have nowhere to go, insufficient funds for passage, and if I simply run, my father will hunt me down. He's invested everything in this arrangement." Owen was silent for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I may have a proposition for you, Miss Lowell, one that could solve both our problems." Violet raised an eyebrow, wary. "What kind of proposition?" "A business arrangement of sorts." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I recently inherited a small ranch near Silver Springs, about 100 miles north of here. Good land, but I need help to run it properly. I need a partner." "A partner," she repeated, confused. "A wife," he clarified, meeting her startled gaze steadily. "In name only, if you prefer. The territory grants certain legal protections to married women that aren't extended to single females. As my wife, your father and Blackburn would have no legal claim to you." Violet stared at him, speechless. "You're proposing marriage to a woman you just met." "I'm offering a solution," Owen corrected. "One that benefits us both. You gain freedom from an unwanted marriage, and I gain a partner to help establish my ranch. Silver Springs is growing quickly. They're bringing the railroad through next year. There's good money to be made." "And what would be expected of me in this arrangement?" Violet asked cautiously. "Your help with the ranch, your companionship, nothing more than you're willing to give." His expression remained earnest. "I'm not Blackburn, Miss Lowell. I don't purchase wives or force unwanted attentions. If over time our arrangement evolves into something more, that would be a mutual decision." Violet's mind raced. The proposition was outlandish, reckless, and yet infinitely preferable to becoming Jasper Blackburn's wife. Still, she hardly knew Owen Lawson. He could be lying about everything. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "What do you really gain? As I said, I need help. Running a ranch alone is nearly impossible." He hesitated. "And I admit I find you intriguing, Miss Lowell. You have spirit that's rare in these parts." "This is madness," she murmured, though more to herself than to him. "Perhaps," he agreed with a slight smile. "But sometimes madness is preferable to a miserable certainty. I'll be in town until tomorrow. If you decide to accept my offer, meet me at the livery stable at sunrise. We can be married by the justice of the peace and be on our way north before anyone knows what's happened. And if I don't come, then I wish you well, Miss Lowell, and hope you find another solution to your predicament." He stood, placing money on the table for their coffee. "The choice is entirely yours." With that, he tipped his hat and left, leaving Violet staring after him, her mind whirling with possibilities and dangers. She spent the remainder of the day in a haze, mechanically gathering the supplies her father had requested, her thoughts consumed by Owen Lawson's proposition. Marriage to a stranger, but one who offered freedom rather than captivity. It was reckless, possibly dangerous, but what alternatives remained? When she returned home, her father barely acknowledged her, busy mending a saddle in the barn. It gave her time to think, to weigh her options as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, her father brought up the dreaded subject again. "Blackburn's sending a wagon for your things on Sunday afternoon after the ceremony. You'll be moving to his ranch immediately." "And what of you?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I'll stay here. Run the ranch with the water rights he's granting." He poured himself another whiskey. "You'll be comfortable. Blackburn's house is the finest in the territory. 2 stories, glass windows brought all the way from St. Louis. A gilded cage is still a cage, Violet murmured. Her father slammed his glass down. You'll show gratitude, girl. Blackburn could have any young woman in the territory. He chose you. He chose our water rights, she corrected. I'm merely included in the transaction. For a moment, Violet thought he might strike her again, but instead her father's expression turned calculating. There's something you should know about Blackburn, he said, his voice low. He's not a patient man. If you defy him, he won't be as forgiving as I've been. His second wife learned that lesson too late. A chill ran down Violet's spine. What happened to her? Really? Her father swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his eyes distant. Martha Blackburn developed independent ideas, wanted to visit her family in Tucson without his permission. They argued. She fell down the stairs. His gaze sharpened on Violet. Accidents happen to disobedient wives. You're sending me to a murderer, she whispered, horror washing through her. I'm ensuring our survival, he countered. Be a good wife and you'll want for nothing. Accept freedom, Violet said, her decision crystallizing in that moment. Accept choice. Her father waved a dismissive hand. Freedom is a luxury for the wealthy. We Lowells have never had that privilege. Violet said nothing more, finishing the dishes in silence. When her father finally stumbled off to bed, whiskey bottle in hand, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote him a letter, her last communication as his daughter. The words were few but clear. She would not marry Jasper Blackburn, would not be sold for water rights, would make her own way in the world. In the pre-dawn darkness, she gathered her few possessions, her mother's cameo, a photograph of happier times, a change of clothes, and the small amount of money she had saved. With silent steps, she saddled Marigold and led her away from the ranch house, mounting only when she was certain her father wouldn't hear the hoofbeats. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as she rode into Gila City, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The town was quiet, most businesses still closed, but as promised, Owen Lawson waited at the livery stable, his black stallion saddled and ready. You came, he said simply, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I did, Violet replied. Your offer still stands. It does. He handed her a small parcel. Some food for the journey. We should be married and on our way before the town wakes properly. The justice of the peace, roused from sleep by Owen's insistent knocking, performed the ceremony in his nightshirt and robe, his wife serving as witness. The exchange of vows took less than 5 minutes, clinical, efficient, binding. Owen placed a simple gold band on Violet's finger, explaining in a whisper that he had purchased it the previous afternoon, hoping she would come. The sun was barely over the horizon as they rode north out of Gila City, husband and wife-in-law if not in fact, strangers bound by mutual necessity and a desperate gamble. My father will come after us, Violet said, as the town disappeared behind them. When he discovers I'm gone, let him, Owen replied, his voice calm but determined. You're my wife now, legally wed. He has no claim on you anymore. Blackburn might come too, she warned. He doesn't strike me as a man who accepts losing what he considers his property. Owen's expression hardened. Let him try. I've dealt with men like Blackburn before. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a steady accompaniment to Violet's tumultuous thoughts. What had she done? Exchanged one form of captivity for another, potentially more dangerous one. Yet when she glanced at Owen Lawson's profile, she saw none of the cruelty that marked her father's features or the predatory calculation she had observed in the few glimpses she'd had of Jasper Blackburn. Tell me about Silver Springs, she said finally, needing to break the silence, to know more about the future she had so recklessly chosen. Owen's face softened. It's beautiful country. Greener than what you're used to. The ranch sits in a valley with mountains to the west that turn purple at sunset. There's a creek that runs year-round through the property, clear, cold water that never fails, even in drought years. How did you come to own it? My uncle left it to me when he died last winter, Owen explained. I've been working cattle drives to save enough money to stock it properly. The Carlisle job was my last, paid well enough to buy a small herd to start with. And now you've acquired a wife as well, Violet observed with a touch of irony. Owen glanced at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. A business partner, he corrected, who happens to be my wife in name. Is that truly all you expect? She asked bluntly. Most men would expect more. His expression turned serious. Miss Lowell, Mrs. Lawson, I should say I meant what I said. This arrangement is what you want it to be. I won't deny I find you attractive, but I'm not in the habit of taking what isn't freely given. The sincerity in his voice eased some of Violet's anxiety. Still, she remained cautious. Good intentions didn't always translate to honorable actions, as her father had taught her all too well. They made camp that evening near a small spring, having covered nearly 30 miles. Violet's muscles ached from the long ride, unused to such extended time in the saddle. Owen efficiently set up a simple camp, building a small fire and preparing a meal of beans, dried beef, and coffee. Tomorrow we'll reach Coyote Pass, he said as they ate. There's a trading post there where we can replenish supplies. After that, it's another 3 days to Silver Springs if the weather holds. Violet nodded, watching him across the fire. In the flickering light, his features seemed both stronger and gentler than she had first noticed. What will happen when we reach your ranch? Our ranch, he corrected. And we'll work. There's a small house that needs some repair, fences to mend, cattle to acquire. It won't be easy at first. I'm not afraid of hard work, Violet said. I've been running my father's household since I was 12. I never doubted it. Owen poured more coffee into her cup. You should get some sleep. I'll take first watch. You expect trouble, he shrugged. Probably not this soon, but it's best to be cautious. Your father might have discovered your absence by now. Violet arranged her bedroll near the fire, acutely aware of the strangeness of her situation alone in the wilderness with a man who was her husband by law but a stranger in truth. Yet exhaustion overcame her wariness, and she fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. She woke to the sound of voices, angry male voices. Dawn was just breaking, the fire reduced to embers. Owen stood several yards away, his stance wide, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Facing him were 3 riders, their features indistinct in the dim light. Violet sat up quickly, reaching for the derringer in her boot. Like I said, gentlemen, my wife and I are simply traveling to our ranch near Silver Springs, Owen was saying, his tone casual but with an unmistakable edge. I don't see how that concerns you. Your wife, is it? The lead rider spat into the dust. That's Edward Lowell's daughter. She's promised to Jasper Blackburn. There's a reward for her safe return. Violet recognized the speaker, then Jim Hanson, one of Blackburn's ranch hands. Her father must have discovered her letter and immediately alerted Blackburn. My wife, Owen confirmed firmly. We were legally married yesterday morning by Justice Parker in Gila City. You're welcome to confirm that fact when you return. Hanson laughed, an ugly sound. Don't matter. Blackburn says he had an agreement with her father, says she's his. The law says otherwise. Owen's hand hadn't moved from his pistol. Now, I suggest you gentlemen turn around and head back to Mr. Blackburn with the news that Violet Lowell is now Violet Lawson, legally wed and no longer available for purchase. Hanson and his companions exchanged glances. Blackburn won't take kindly to this news. That's his concern, not mine. Owen's voice remained steady. 3 against 1 aren't great odds, but I guarantee at least 2 of you won't ride away from this if you try anything. The tension stretched, taut as a bowstring. Violet gripped her derringer, ready to join the fight if necessary. Finally, Hanson spat again. "This ain't over, Cowboy. Blackburn doesn't lose what he considers his." He wheeled his horse around. "We'll be seeing you again." Only when the riders had disappeared into the distance did Owen relax his stance. He turned to find Violet standing, derringer in hand. "You were ready to fight," he observed, a note of approval in his voice. "I didn't exchange one tyrant for another just to be treated as helpless," she replied, tucking the small gun away. Owen nodded. "We should move quickly. They'll be back with more men once they report to Blackburn." They broke camp with efficient haste, and within minutes were riding north at a faster pace than the previous day. The encounter had changed something between them, a shared danger creating a tentative bond, where before there had been only a business arrangement. "Thank you," Violet said after they had ridden in silence for several miles, "for standing firm." Owen glanced at her. "No need for thanks. You're my wife now. That means something to me, even if our marriage began as a matter of convenience." "Does it?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Mean something." He considered this as they rode. "My father taught me that a man's word is his bond. When I said those vows yesterday, I meant them, to protect and honor you, regardless of how our marriage came to be." It was a startlingly old-fashioned sentiment in a land where pragmatism typically outweighed principle. Violet found herself warming to this man who spoke of honor in a territory where that quality was often in short supply. They reached Coyote Pass by mid-afternoon, a small settlement consisting of little more than a trading post, a saloon, and a handful of rough cabins. Owen suggested they remain only long enough to purchase supplies before continuing, wary of Blackburn's men potentially following their trail. The trading post was run by an elderly Navajo man and his Mexican wife, both of whom greeted Owen with evident familiarity. "Lawson, it has been many moons," the old man said in heavily accented English. "You bring wife now. Good. Man needs wife." "This is Violet," Owen said, placing a protective hand on the small of her back. "My new bride." The woman, Alina, smiled warmly at Violet. "Come, Nina, while men talk business. I have things for new wife." While Owen negotiated for supplies with the old man, Alina led Violet to a back room filled with an assortment of household goods, pots, blankets, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. "New wife needs many things," Alina said, selecting items with practiced efficiency. "Special tea for women's health, good knife for kitchen, soft blanket for cold nights." She gave Violet a knowing look. "Husband is handsome, yes, strong, will give many children." Violet blushed. "Our marriage is new, we're still getting acquainted." Alina's weathered face crinkled in a smile. "Love comes with time, like good stew. Slow cooking makes best flavor." She pressed a small packet of herbs into Violet's hand. "For when you ready for babies, makes woman fertile." Embarrassed but touched by the woman's straightforward kindness, Violet tucked the packet into her pocket. "Thank you." When they rejoined the men, Owen had completed his purchases: flour, coffee, salt, ammunition, and other essentials. He raised an eyebrow at the items Alina insisted on adding to their supplies but paid without comment. As they prepared to leave, the old man pulled Owen aside, speaking in low tones. Violet caught fragments about men asking questions and taking the high trail. Owen's expression was grim when he returned to her side. "Blackburn's men were here yesterday, offering money for information about travelers heading north. We need to take a different route than I planned, less direct, but safer." They departed immediately, following a narrow trail that wound up into the foothills rather than continuing along the more established path through the valley. The going was slower, the terrain more challenging, but by nightfall, they had put significant distance between themselves and Coyote Pass. Their camp that night was more carefully chosen, a defensible position with clear lines of sight in all directions. Owen insisted on keeping the fire small and shielded to avoid detection. "How far are we from Silver Springs now?" Violet asked as they shared a simple meal. "Taking this route about 4 days," Owen replied, "assuming we don't encounter further delays. You think they'll find us?" He considered the question seriously. Blackburn's influence extends far, but not infinitely. Once we're beyond Rattlesnake Ridge, we'll be outside his usual territory, and I have friends in Silver Springs who won't take kindly to outside interference. Violet studied him across the small fire. "You've stood against men like Blackburn before, haven't you?" Something flickered in Owen's eyes, an old pain, quickly masked. "Let's just say I understand men who believe they can own people." His tone discouraged further questions, and Violet respected his privacy. They all had histories they preferred not to discuss. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Owen set up his bedroll at a respectful distance from hers. The gesture, small as it was, reinforced his earlier assurances. This was indeed a marriage of convenience, not desire, at least for now. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Violet found herself watching the strong lines of his profile silhouetted against the night sky as he kept watch. There was something undeniably appealing about Owen Lawson, a quiet strength, an innate decency that she had rarely encountered in her life. It was too soon for anything resembling love, but not too soon for appreciation, for the beginning of trust. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm of hard riding, brief rests, and cautious camping. They encountered no further sign of pursuit, though Owen remained vigilant, often backtracking to ensure they weren't being followed. The terrain gradually changed as they traveled north, the harsh desert giving way to rolling grasslands dotted with juniper and pine. The air grew cooler, the nights more comfortable. They spoke more freely during these days, sharing stories of their pasts. Owen told her of growing up on a small farm in Missouri, of losing his parents to fever when he was 16, of working cattle drives across the West to earn his way. Violet spoke of her mother's gentle wisdom, of the better days on the ranch before drought and desperation had transformed her father. On the 4th day after leaving Coyote Pass, they crested a ridge, and Owen reined his horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing to a verdant valley below where a creek cut a silver path through grassland. "Silver Springs. Our ranch is just beyond that stand of cottonwoods." Violet gazed down at the peaceful scene, so different from the harsh landscape she had known all her life. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's home," Owen replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Or it will be with some work." They descended into the valley as afternoon shadows lengthened. As they approached the cottonwood grove, a small ranch house came into view, a simple one-story structure built of logs and stone, with a covered porch running its length. Nearby stood a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. "It needs work," Owen said apologetically as they drew closer. "My uncle wasn't much for maintenance in his later years." The house was indeed weathered, with broken window panes and a sagging section of porch, but Violet could see the bones of something sturdy and welcoming beneath the neglect. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. After the uncertainty of the past week, even this rough homestead represented safety and possibility. They had just dismounted when a rifle shot cracked through the air, the bullet splintering wood inches from Owen's head. Instantly, he pushed Violet behind him, drawing his pistol in one fluid motion. "That's far enough," a voice called from the direction of the barn. "Next shot won't miss." "Carson, you old fool, it's me," Owen shouted. "Owen Lawson." A moment of silence, then a figure emerged from the barn, an older man with a grizzled beard and faded blue eyes that widened in recognition. "Lawson? Well, I'll be damned." He lowered his rifle. "Thought you were those rustlers come back to try their luck again." Rustlers? Owen asked sharply as they approached the man. Had some trouble last month, Carson explained. Group of men claiming to work for some outfit from down south. Tried to run off the few head of cattle your uncle had left. I persuaded them otherwise. He glanced curiously at Violet. Who's the lady? My wife, Owen said, the words still sounding strange to his ears. Violet, this is Hank Carson. He worked for my uncle for 20 years. I asked him to keep an eye on the place until I could return. Wife, Carson's bushy eyebrows shot up. You've been busy, boy. He tipped his hat to Violet. Madam, didn't mean to frighten you with the welcome. No harm done, Violet assured him, taking in the old cowboy's weathered features and kind eyes. I appreciate anyone who defends their home. Carson's face creased in a smile. She'll do, Lawson, he approved. Come on inside. Place isn't much, but there's coffee on the stove. The interior of the ranch house was sparsely furnished but cleaner than its exterior would have suggested. A central room served as both kitchen and living area, with 2 small bedrooms opening off it. Simple furnishings: a table, chairs, a sofa covered in faded fabric. A stone fireplace gave it a functional if not luxurious feel. As Carson busied himself with coffee, Owen gave Violet an apologetic glance. It's not what you're accustomed to, I know. You forget where I've been living, she replied. This is a palace compared to what my father's house had become. They settled at the table with steaming cups while Carson filled Owen in on the state of the ranch, the remaining livestock, the condition of the fences and outbuildings, the recent rustling attempt. They weren't ordinary thieves, Carson said, his expression troubled. Too well-dressed, too confident. Leader had a fancy pistol with pearl grips, said they'd be back. Owen and Violet exchanged glances. When was this? Owen asked. About 3 weeks ago, Carson replied. Why, you know something about them? Possibly, Owen said grimly. Describe the leader again. Carson scratched his beard. Tall fella, well-dressed, had a scar right about here. He traced a line from the corner of his eye down his cheek. Cold eyes, the kind that don't blink when they kill. Blackburn, Violet whispered, her blood running cold. That's Jasper Blackburn. Owen's expression hardened. You're sure? She nodded. My father had a photograph of him. The scar is distinctive. Carson looked between them, confusion etched on his features. Someone want to tell me what's going on. Over another cup of coffee, Owen explained the situation: Violet's escape from an arranged marriage, their hasty wedding, the pursuit by Blackburn's men. Carson listened without interruption, his weathered face growing increasingly grim. So this Blackburn fella was here before you even arrived, he mused when they finished. That's mighty interesting timing. Too interesting to be coincidence, Owen agreed. Question is, how did he know about this place? And why would he be interested in a small ranch so far from his territory? Carson rose, walking to a battered desk in the corner. From a drawer, he removed a folded document. Found this among your uncle's papers after he died. Might explain a few things. Owen unfolded the yellowed paper, a land survey map dated 1874. His eyes widened as he studied it. There's a notation here about a silver deposit in the North Ridge. Yep, Carson nodded. Your uncle never had the money to investigate properly, but he always claimed there was a rich vein up there. Word might have gotten around. That would explain Blackburn's interest, Violet said. If there's silver on this land, then it's worth far more than a struggling cattle ranch, Owen finished, a muscle working in his jaw. And Blackburn's the type who takes what he wants. Well, he can't have this place, Carson stated flatly. Your uncle left it to you fair and square. Got the deed locked up in the bank in Silver Springs. Owen refolded the map. First priority is securing the ranch. If Blackburn's men return or Blackburn himself, we need to be ready. They spent the remainder of the evening taking inventory of supplies and weapons, developing a plan to defend the property if necessary. Carson offered to ride into town the next day to alert the sheriff and gather any information about strangers in the area. As night fell, the old cowboy took his leave, returning to the small cabin behind the barn where he'd been living since Owen's uncle died. "I'll be within shouting distance if you need anything," he assured them with a knowing wink that brought color to Violet's cheeks. Clearly, he assumed their marriage was conventional in all respects. When they were alone, an awkward silence fell between them. The reality of their situation, husband and wife with no established boundaries, suddenly seemed more immediate within the confines of the small house. "I'll take the sofa," Owen said finally, breaking the tension. "You can have the main bedroom." Violet glanced toward the room in question. "That doesn't seem fair. This is your home." "Our home," he corrected gently. "And it's perfectly fair. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable, Violet. I meant what I said about this arrangement being on your terms." She studied him in the lamplight, this man who had risked everything to help a woman he barely knew, who continued to honor his word when many would not. Something stirred within her, not quite desire, but something equally powerful. Respect, gratitude, the beginning of genuine affection. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to fully express the emotions welling within her. Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a full day." The bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the valley. Violet unpacked her few belongings, changed into her nightgown, and slipped beneath the covers, exhaustion from their journey quickly pulling her toward sleep. Her last thought before surrendering to slumber was that, for the first time in years, she felt safe. The following days established a rhythm as they settled into life at the ranch. Owen and Carson worked on repairs to the house and outbuildings, while Violet tackled the interior, cleaning years of dust and neglect from the rooms. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and purple. Carson returned from town with news that the sheriff had promised to keep an eye out for Blackburn or his men, but also with the troubling information that a group of well-dressed strangers had been asking questions about Owen Lawson's ranch at the local saloon. "They're closing in," Owen said grimly. "Sooner or later they'll make their move." "What will we do?" Violet asked. "Be ready," was his simple answer. They continued working on the ranch, but now with an undercurrent of tension. Owen insisted that Violet carry her derringer at all times and taught her to use his Winchester rifle as well. They established signals and protocols in case of attack. Despite the looming threat, these days brought Violet and Owen closer. Working side by side, sharing meals, planning for the future of the ranch, they were building something that had begun as a practical arrangement, but was evolving into a genuine partnership. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Violet found herself studying Owen's profile in the fading light. He had removed his hat, and a strand of dark hair fell across his forehead in a way she found unexpectedly endearing. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That I'm grateful," she replied honestly, "for everything you've done." "I've done nothing special," Owen said, looking out over their land. "Any decent man would have helped." "We both know that's not true," Violet countered gently. "Most men would have ridden past that creek without stopping. Most wouldn't offer marriage to save a stranger from a bad situation." He turned to face her fully. "You weren't a stranger, not really. I knew everything I needed to know about you in those first few minutes at the creek." "And what was that?" she asked, curiosity warming her voice. "That you were brave, independent, unwilling to be pushed around." His smile was soft in the twilight. "That you deserved better than what fate had handed you." Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change in the air, in the way they looked at each other. Violet felt a flutter in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the mild evening. Owen seemed to sense it too, for he cleared his throat and stood. "It's getting late. We should turn in." But as he moved to enter the house, Violet caught his hand. "Owen," she said softly, "I don't think you need to sleep on the sofa anymore." He went very still, his eyes searching hers. "Violet, are you sure? There's no rush, no expectations." She rose to stand before him, suddenly certain. "I'm sure." This may have begun as an arrangement of convenience, but it's become something more, at least for me. "For me as well," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Since that first day at the creek." When he lowered his head to kiss her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, as if they had been moving toward this moment from their first meeting. His lips were gentle, questioning, allowing her to set the pace. Violet found herself responding with unexpected fervor, her arms sliding around his neck, drawing him closer. That night, their marriage was consummated not out of obligation but desire, a mutual decision that transformed their paper arrangement into something real and binding. In the quiet aftermath, as Violet lay in the circle of Owen's arms, she marveled at the strange path that had led her here from near captivity to a freedom she had never anticipated. "No regrets," Owen murmured against her hair. "None," she answered truthfully. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Their newfound intimacy deepened in the days that followed, their partnership extending from the practical management of the ranch to a genuine marriage in all aspects. They worked together, planned together, and at night discovered each other with increasing passion and tenderness. But the threat of Blackburn hadn't disappeared. 2 weeks after their arrival at Silver Springs, Carson spotted riders watching the ranch from the ridge to the east. They disappeared when he rode out to investigate, but the message was clear. They were being observed. "We can't live like this indefinitely," Owen said that evening as they discussed the situation. "Waiting for an attack, always looking over our shoulders. What do you suggest?" Violet asked, recognizing the determined set of his jaw. "I'm going into town tomorrow to speak with the sheriff again and send telegrams to some friends who owe me favors. We need to build our defenses." "I'm coming with you," Violet said firmly. "We face this together." The town of Silver Springs was larger than Gila City, but still small by Eastern standards, a main street lined with businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and several side streets of modest homes. It had the bustling energy of a place on the rise, with new construction visible at the edges. Their first stop was the sheriff's office, where they found a harried-looking man in his 50s sorting through wanted posters. "Sheriff Miller," Owen greeted him. "Got a minute to talk about Jasper Blackburn?" The name had an immediate effect. Miller's head snapped up, his expression sharpening. "What about him?" They explained the situation: Violet's near-forced marriage, their escape, the evidence that Blackburn was interested in the Lawson Ranch for its potential silver deposits. "Blackburn's bad business," Miller acknowledged when they finished. "His influence doesn't officially extend this far north, but he's been trying to expand his operations. Rumor has it he's been buying up mining claims throughout the territory. We have reason to believe he'll make a move on our ranch," Owen said. "Soon." Miller leaned back in his chair, considering. "I can't spare deputies for guard duty, Lawson. Town's growing too fast, keeping us busy enough as it is." "I'm not asking for guards," Owen replied. "Just your support if things get ugly." The sheriff studied them both for a long moment. "You're on legitimate ranch land with a proper deed. If Blackburn or his men trespass or threaten you, that's within my jurisdiction." He nodded decisively. "You have my support." Their next stop was the telegraph office, where Owen sent messages to several contacts throughout the territory, former colleagues from his cattle-driving days, men who owed him favors or simply respected him enough to ride to his aid. As they crossed the street toward the general store, a voice called out, "Mrs. Lawson, Violet Lawson." Violet turned to find a well-dressed woman hurrying toward them, her face alight with curiosity. "Yes, I'm Margaret Wilson, editor of the Silver Springs Sentinel." The woman extended a gloved hand. "I've been hoping to meet you since hearing of Owen's marriage. Such a whirlwind romance. The whole town's talking about it." Owen stepped protectively closer to Violet. "My wife's personal life isn't news, Mrs. Wilson." "Oh, but it is." Margaret Wilson's eyes sparkled with professional interest. "Local ranch owner returns with beautiful bride after years of bachelorhood. That's exactly the kind of story our readers enjoy. And if rumors about Jasper Blackburn's involvement are true, well." She lowered her voice. "That would make quite the headline." Violet felt Owen tense beside her, but before he could respond, an idea occurred to her. "Perhaps we could discuss this further, Mrs. Wilson. Over tea." Owen gave her a questioning look, but Violet squeezed his arm reassuringly. "I'll meet you at the general store in an hour," she told him. Margaret Wilson's tea parlor turned out to be the back room of the newspaper office, a cozy space dominated by a printing press and stacks of paper. As they settled at a small table with cups of fragrant tea, Violet considered her approach carefully. "Mrs. Wilson, you mentioned Jasper Blackburn," she began. "What exactly have you heard?" The editor's expression turned serious. "That he's taken an interest in Silver Springs. That he's not the kind of man who accepts refusal. And that you, my dear, managed something no one else has. You escaped his grasp." "The situation is complicated," Violet admitted, "and potentially dangerous. I suspected as much." Margaret leaned forward eagerly. "Tell me everything." Instead of resisting, Violet saw an opportunity. For the next hour, she recounted her story: her father's arrangement, Owen's intervention, their escape, and Blackburn's pursuit. She emphasized the legal nature of her marriage to Owen and Blackburn's apparent interest in the silver deposits on their land. Margaret took copious notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Violet finished, the editor sat back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Mrs. Lawson, you've given me the story of the year," she declared. "But more importantly, you've given yourself protection. Protection. Once this story runs, everyone in 3 territories will know about Jasper Blackburn's attempts to force you into marriage and steal your husband's land. Public opinion is a powerful thing, my dear." Margaret tapped her notebook. "Men like Blackburn operate in shadows. Shine a light on them, and they scatter like cockroaches." Violet hadn't considered this angle, but she immediately recognized its value. "When would this story be published?" "Tomorrow's edition," Margaret promised. "I'll work through the night if necessary." When Violet rejoined Owen at the general store and explained what she had done, his initial concern gave way to admiration. "That's brilliant," he acknowledged. "Blackburn might be willing to confront us directly, but a public scandal is another matter entirely." "Precisely," Violet agreed. "He has political aspirations. According to what my father once said, this kind of publicity would damage those significantly." They returned to the ranch with supplies and a renewed sense of hope. Carson greeted them with news that 2 of Owen's friends had already arrived in response to his telegrams, experienced hands who had ridden with him on cattle drives and were now camped in the north pasture, keeping watch. The following days brought more allies, 5 more men, all tough, capable cowboys who owed Owen favors or simply respected him enough to come when called. With Carson and Owen, they formed a formidable defensive force. As promised, Margaret Wilson's article appeared in the Silver Springs Sentinel, its headline boldly declaring, "Cattle Baron's Sinister Plot, Forced Marriage and Land Theft Scheme Exposed." The story painted Jasper Blackburn as a villain and Owen and Violet as heroic young newlyweds defending their rightful property. "Blackburn won't like this," Carson observed as they read the paper at breakfast. Men like him hate nothing more than being made to look foolish in public. Which means he'll either back down, Owen began, or he'll come at us harder than ever, Violet finished, out of pride if nothing else. They didn't have to wait long for the answer. The next day, a rider approached the ranch carrying a white flag of truce. Owen, flanked by his friends, met the man at the property boundary. "Mr. Blackburn requests a meeting," the messenger announced. "Tomorrow at noon, here at your ranch. He comes with peaceful intentions to discuss a business proposition." Owen's expression remained neutral. "Tell Mr. Blackburn he's welcome to come. Unarmed with no more than 2 men, I'll offer the same courtesy." After the messenger departed, Violet confronted Owen. "You're not seriously considering meeting with him?" "I am," Owen confirmed. "It's better to face him directly than wait for him to make another move. Besides, I'm curious what he has to say." "It's a trap," she insisted. Owen drew her into his arms. "That's why I'll have 3 men hidden with rifles and why you'll be inside with Carson. If this turns bad, you head out the back way to the sheriff." Violet pressed her face against his chest, inhaling his familiar scent. "I didn't escape one dangerous man just to lose you to another." He kissed the top of her head. "You won't lose me, I promise." Jasper Blackburn arrived precisely at noon the following day, riding a magnificent black horse and accompanied by 2 hard-faced men who scanned the surroundings with professional vigilance. Blackburn himself was exactly as Violet had described: tall, expensively dressed, with a prominent scar running down his right cheek. His eyes were pale blue and utterly without warmth. Owen waited on the porch, Carson beside him. Violet, despite Owen's instructions, stood in the doorway, refusing to hide completely. "Mr. Lawson," Blackburn called as he dismounted, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." His gaze shifted to Violet, a proprietary look that made her skin crawl. "And Mrs. Lawson." "A pleasure to finally meet you." "The pleasure is all yours, I assure you," Violet replied coolly. Blackburn's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Spirited. Edward always said you had fire." He returned his attention to Owen. "I'll be direct, Lawson. You have something I want." "My wife is not available for negotiation," Owen stated flatly. "So if that's your proposition, this meeting is already over." "Not the girl," Blackburn said dismissively. "Though I admit I'm disappointed in that regard. No, I'm interested in your land. Specifically, the silver deposit in the North Ridge." "So you admit you were planning to steal my ranch," Owen said. Blackburn shrugged elegantly. "Business is business. But circumstances have changed. That newspaper article was quite creative. Makes further aggressive action problematic for me." "What do you want, Blackburn?" Owen asked, his patience visibly thinning. "To buy the mineral rights to your land. Fair and square." Blackburn named a figure that made Carson whistle softly. "You keep the ranch, the water, the grazing land. I get the silver. Everyone wins." Owen and Violet exchanged glances. The amount was substantial enough to fully stock the ranch with quality cattle, complete all needed repairs, and still have a comfortable cushion. "And if we refuse?" Violet asked. Blackburn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Why would you? It's a generous offer." "Because some things aren't for sale," Owen replied evenly. "This ranch has been in my family for 2 generations. I intend to pass it to my children someday. Intact." Something dangerous flashed in Blackburn's eyes. "Consider carefully, Lawson. My patience and generosity are limited commodities." "So is my tolerance for threats," Owen countered. "The answer is no. The mineral rights stay with the ranch. Now I believe our business is concluded." For a tense moment, Blackburn remained motionless, his pale eyes calculating. Then, with deliberate care, he replaced his hat. "A shame we couldn't reach an agreement. Good day, Mr. Lawson, Mrs. Lawson." He nodded coldly before remounting his horse. As they rode away, Carson spat into the dust. That man's not done with us, not by a long shot. No, Owen agreed grimly. He's not. That night, they maintained a double watch, expecting some form of retaliation. But days passed without incident, then a week. Some of Owen's friends, needed elsewhere, reluctantly departed, leaving only 3 plus Carson to help defend the ranch. Life settled into an uneasy routine. Owen and Violet purchased a small herd of cattle with some of their savings, began planting a vegetable garden, continued repairs on the house. They were building a life together, day by day, their initial arrangement of convenience deepening into genuine love. At night, as they lay together in the darkness, they spoke of the future children they hoped to have, improvements to the ranch, dreams they shared. The threat of Blackburn remained, but it had receded into the background of their daily existence. Then, a month after Blackburn's visit, disaster struck. Violet was alone at the ranch house, Owen and the others having ridden out to check on the cattle in the north pasture when she smelled smoke. Rushing outside, she saw flames licking at the roof of the barn, spreading with terrifying speed in the dry summer air. She ran for the well, but before she could draw water, a man stepped from behind the structure, pistol aimed at her chest. "Not another step, Mrs. Lawson," he said calmly. It was one of Blackburn's men who had accompanied him to the meeting. "Mr. Blackburn sends his regrets." "What do you want?" Violet demanded, acutely aware of her derringer, useless in her pocket where she couldn't reach it, just delivering a message. The man gestured toward the burning barn with his free hand. "Accidents happen when people make poor business decisions. Today it's a barn, tomorrow, who knows?" Violet glanced toward the house, calculating her chances of reaching Owen's rifle inside. The gunman noticed. "Don't try it," he advised. "I'd hate to shoot a woman, but I will if necessary." The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew both their attention. Owen and the others, having seen the smoke from a distance, were riding hard toward the ranch, rifles drawn. "Looks like my time's up," the man said, backing toward his horse tethered behind the chicken coop. "Remember the message, Mrs. Lawson. Next time won't be just property." He mounted and galloped away as Owen and the others thundered into the yard. Owen leapt from his horse while it was still moving, running to Violet and pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes wild with fear. "No, I'm fine," she assured him, trembling with reaction now that the immediate danger had passed. "But the barn, to hell with the barn," Owen said fiercely. "As long as you're safe." The others had already formed a bucket line, but it was clear the barn couldn't be saved. They focused instead on preventing the fire from spreading to the house or other outbuildings. When the flames were finally contained, Owen gathered everyone on the porch. His expression was harder than Violet had ever seen it. "This ends now," he declared. "Blackburn's crossed the line. We're taking the fight to him." "Owen, no," Violet protested. "That's exactly what he wants to draw you out, away from the ranch where you're vulnerable." "She's right," Carson agreed. "Man like Blackburn, he's hoping you'll react emotional-like. Make mistakes." Owen paced the length of the porch, frustration evident in every line of his body. "So we just wait for the next attack, for him to burn the house next time, or worse." "No," Violet said firmly. "We use the law. Sheriff Miller said he'd support us if Blackburn made a move. This is arson, plain and simple, and I can identify the man who did it." Owen stopped pacing, considering her words. "You're right," he admitted finally. "We do this properly. Through the law." The next morning, Owen and Violet rode into Silver Springs to file a formal complaint with Sheriff Miller. The sheriff listened gravely to their account, writing down details and promising to send deputies to investigate. "Arson's a serious charge," he told them. "If we can prove Blackburn ordered it, or even just that his man did the deed, that's prison time." "Can you prove it, though?" Owen asked skeptically. Men like Blackburn are good at creating distance between themselves and their crimes. Sometimes just making the accusation public is enough, Miller replied. Like that newspaper article your wife arranged, speaking of which. He gestured toward the window, where Margaret Wilson could be seen hurrying toward the sheriff's office, notepad in hand. The editor's outrage at the attack was genuine. This is precisely the kind of lawlessness that Silver Springs has worked to leave behind, she declared, scribbling furiously as Violet recounted the events. Rest assured, this will be front-page news tomorrow. True to her word, the next day's Sentinel carried a scathing account of the arson attack, explicitly linking it to Blackburn's earlier attempt to purchase the Lawson Ranch's mineral rights. The story included Sheriff Miller's official statement that a full investigation was underway and that he had dispatched telegrams to territorial authorities regarding Blackburn's activities. 2 days later, a more unexpected ally emerged. A lawyer from Prescott arrived at the ranch, introducing himself as James Bennett, representing the Territorial Mining Commission. The commission has taken an interest in recent events, Bennett explained as they sat at the kitchen table. Mr. Blackburn's methods of acquiring mining claims have been questionable for some time. Your case provides an opportunity to examine his activities more thoroughly. You mean you've been looking for an excuse to investigate him, Owen observed. Bennett smiled thinly. Let's say your situation aligns with the commission's interests. We're prepared to offer protection while our investigation proceeds. Additionally, we can provide legal assistance should you wish to pursue damages for the destruction of your property. The lawyer's arrival shifted the balance of power. Blackburn, facing scrutiny from territorial authorities alongside local law enforcement, found his room to maneuver severely restricted. No further attacks occurred at the ranch, though Owen maintained vigilant watches, unwilling to trust that the danger had truly passed. Weeks stretched into months. The burned barn was rebuilt, stronger than before. The cattle herd grew as new calves were born. Violet planted flower beds around the house, transforming the weathered structure into a true home. Life at Silver Springs settled into a peaceful rhythm. Then, on a crisp autumn morning 6 months after their hasty wedding, Violet received a letter that reopened old wounds. It was from her father, forwarded by the postmaster in Gila City, who had recognized her name in the newspaper accounts. Owen found her on the porch, the opened letter in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Bad news." "My father," she said, her voice thick. "He's dying. Consumption, according to the doctor. He wants to see me before the end." Owen sat beside her, taking her hand. "Do you want to go?" Violet struggled with the question. "I don't know, after everything he did." "He's still your father," Owen said gently, "whatever his faults." She looked at him, this man who had saved her from a loveless fate, who had shown her what true partnership could be. "Would you come with me? I don't think I can face him alone." "Of course," Owen promised. "Whenever you're ready." The journey back to Gila City was a reversal of their flight months before, but everything else had changed. They traveled openly, without fear, Violet secure in her identity as Owen's wife, not by arrangement now, but by choice, by love. The Lowell Ranch looked smaller than Violet remembered, more decrepit. The drought had worsened, leaving the land barren and dusty. A young Mexican woman answered their knock, explaining in halting English that she had been hired to care for Mr. Lowell in his illness. Edward Lowell lay in the bed where Violet's mother had died years before, his once powerful frame wasted by disease. His eyes, however, remained alert, widening at the sight of his daughter. "Violet," he whispered, his voice a shadow of its former strength. "You came." "I came," she confirmed, settling in a chair beside the bed while Owen waited respectfully in the doorway. "How are you, father?" A rasping laugh that became a cough. Dying, as you can see. Turns out whiskey isn't a cure for consumption after all." An awkward silence fell. There was too much history between them, too many hurts to address in the little time remaining. "I heard about Blackburn," Edward said finally. "About what he tried to do, what I helped him try to do." "Yes," Violet said simply, neither accusatory nor forgiving. "I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him physically, each word an effort. "About everything, about you, about him." His gaze shifted to Owen. "Is he good to you, this husband you chose?" "Better than I could have imagined," Violet answered honestly. "We have a good life. A ranch in Silver Springs, cattle. Land with water." A ghost of a smile touched Edward's pale lips. "Good, that's good." He reached for her hand with trembling fingers. "I don't expect forgiveness, Violet. Just wanted to see you once more, to tell you." His voice broke. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. Even if I was too blind to see it." Despite everything, tears welled in Violet's eyes. This broken man before her bore little resemblance to the father who had tried to sell her for water rights, who had ruled their home with bitterness and whiskey. In his place was simply a dying old man with regrets. "I forgive you, father," she said softly, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not for you, for me, so I can move forward without carrying that weight." Relief washed over Edward's features. "Thank you," he whispered. "More than I deserve." They stayed 3 days. On the morning of the 4th, Edward Lowell drew his last breath, his daughter holding his hand. They buried him beside his wife in the small family plot, the local pastor presiding over a simple service attended by a handful of neighbors. Afterward, as they prepared to depart, the young Mexican woman who had cared for Edward handed Violet a sealed envelope. "Your father, he write this," she explained. "Say give to you after." Alone in her childhood bedroom, Violet opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a deed to the Lowell Ranch and all its remaining land and a brief note. "For you and your husband. Make it live again if you can. If not, sell it and use the money for your future. It's all I have left to give. Father." When she showed the documents to Owen, he studied them thoughtfully. "What do you want to do?" Violet looked around at the ranch where she had grown up, the good memories and the bad inextricably linked to this harsh, beautiful land. "I don't know. This place holds so many ghosts." "We don't have to decide immediately," Owen said. "The land will wait." "Let's go home. Think about it there." Home. The word resonated in Violet's heart. Home was no longer this place of complicated memories, but the ranch in Silver Springs, the life she and Owen were building together. The return journey felt lighter somehow, as if in forgiving her father, Violet had shed a burden she hadn't fully recognized was weighing her down. As the familiar outline of their ranch appeared on the horizon, a sense of rightness, of belonging, washed over her. 2 weeks after their return, significant news arrived from 2 sources. First, a letter from James Bennett, the mining commission lawyer, informing them that Jasper Blackburn had been indicted on multiple counts of fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy related to his mining acquisitions. The investigation, triggered by the events at their ranch, had uncovered a pattern of illegal activities stretching back years. "He'll likely spend the rest of his life in territorial prison," Owen observed after reading the letter. "Or at least enough years that he won't trouble us again." The second piece of news was more personal. After weeks of suspicion, a visit to the doctor in Silver Springs confirmed what Violet had begun to hope. She was expecting their first child, due in the spring. Owen's joy at the news was boundless. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen before setting her down with exaggerated care, suddenly concerned about her condition. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice as he placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "The first of many, I hope," Violet replied, covering his hand with her own. "This house was built for a family." As winter settled over Silver Springs, bringing snow that blanketed the valley in pristine white, they made plans for the future. The silver deposit in the North Ridge would be developed, but properly, with fair wages for miners and proper safety measures. The profits would ensure their ranch, and their growing family would thrive for generations. The Lowell Ranch in Gila City presented a more complicated decision. In the end, they chose not to sell but to transform. Working with the territorial government, they arranged for the land to be converted into a way station for settlers traveling west, with a reliable water source for those crossing the harsh desert. "A place of new beginnings," Violet said when the arrangements were finalized. "Rather than bitter endings, I think my father would approve." On a bright April morning, with wildflowers carpeting the valley and new calves dotting the pastures, Violet gave birth to a son strong, lunged, and healthy, with his father's turquoise eyes and a tuft of his mother's golden brown hair. They named him Edward Carson Lawson, honoring both Violet's father and the old cowboy who had become like family. Carson, now permanently employed as the ranch's foreman, wept unashamedly when they told him. As Violet sat on the porch that evening, her son nursing contentedly at her breast, Owen beside her with an arm protectively around her shoulders, she reflected on the strange path that had led them here. A chance meeting at a creek, a desperate escape, an arrangement of convenience that had blossomed into the deepest love she could imagine. "Any regrets?" Owen asked softly, echoing the question he had asked on their first night as true husband and wife. Violet looked out over their land, the productive pastures, the clear running creek, the mountains turning purple in the sunset exactly as Owen had described that first day. She thought of the community they had found in Silver Springs, the friends they had made, the respect they had earned. And most of all, the family they had created, not just the child in her arms, but the bonds of love and trust between them. "Not a single one," she answered, leaning into his embrace. "Every step, every choice led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Owen kissed her temple, then the downy head of their sleeping son. "Me too," he murmured, "for all the days to come." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, watching the first stars appear above their land, their home, the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the western sky.